Another day, another raft of bad legal news for Donald Trump. I'm not saying that committing crimes with the same eagerness that your high college roommate eats Reese's with was a bad idea, but yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. To Trump's dismay, according to a new ruling by a federal judge, Trump will have to sit for a deposition next week in person, October 19th, as part of the defamation lawsuit brought by E. Jean Carroll, who accused Trump of raping her in a department store in the 90s, allegations that Trump, of course, denies. Now, Trump had sought to delay the deposition, as he's already done for 20 months and counting, when he found out that Carroll intended to sue him in November under a new state law in New York that allows victims of sexual assault to sue the perpetrators years after the encounter. And that new law is called the Adult Survivors Act. The law temporarily waives the statute of limitations against sexual assault claims and allows those who were at least 18 at the time to file suit against the people or institutions that abused them or allowed the abuse to happen. Good news for those survivors, not so great news for people like Donald Trump. However, despite the Trump team's efforts to delay, the judge explained that the question of whether he raped her was, quote, paramount to the current case, and avoiding a deposition now because it could be used in the future, quote, would make no sense, which, to be clear, tends to be a recurring theme when dealing with Donald Trump. The judge went on to say that even though they're waiting on a federal appeals court to rule on a key element of this case, that this case is still ongoing and, quote, completing those depositions, which have already been delayed for years, would impose no undue burden on Mr. Trump, let alone any irreparable injury. The defendant should not be permitted to run the clock out on plaintiff's attempt to gain a new remedy for what allegedly was a serious wrong. But while Trump would face no undue burden, the judge said that Carroll would face, quote, substantial injury from further delay, given that, again, she's already been mired in a case that's languished for 20 months and that she's already in her 70s. And while it's certainly not unlike Trump to delay any and every instance of potential accountability, it doesn't look like those tactics are working too well for him anymore. I should note, too, that one of the tactics he used to avoid accountability altogether was pointing to the fact that Trump made his defamatory claims about her while he was president in 2019. Those claims being that he couldn't have raped her because she wasn't his type and that she fabricated that whole claim to boost book sales. I know. And so he's arguing that because he was a federal employee at the time, as being president, that the Justice Department, and not Trump himself, should actually be the defendant in this case, and because the government can't be sued for defamation, that lawsuit would immediately end. This federal judge ruled against Trump and the DOJ, Trump appealed, and now we're waiting on the D.C. Court of Appeals to determine if Trump was acting within the scope of his role as president. Now, if they find that he was acting within the scope of his role, then the Justice Department will be substituted for him. If they find that Trump wasn't acting within the scope of his role, then the suit should be able to move forward against Trump himself. And while I'm not a lawyer, I could say with some degree of certainty that denying your rape allegations and accusing your accuser of lying to boost book sales doesn't exactly seem like the job of our president. Pretty sure that falls just outside the role of the duties of the President of the United States. For reference, here's what Carroll said in the immediate aftermath of Trump making those comments.
I want to begin just by asking you about the latest thing that the president has said just short time ago. He gave an interview to The Hill. He said, I'll say it with great respect. Number one, she's not my type. Number two, it never happened. It never happened, okay?
I love that. I am so glad I am not his type. I am so glad. This was 20 years ago. And I probably was, at that moment, in that 5 minutes, the most attractive woman in Bergdorf's in that one bit of time.
And you think that's what it was about for him?
I don't know what it was about. We were having a high old time. You remember Donald Trump, hail fellow, well met, walking up and down the streets of New York, greeting everybody. Everybody liked him.
You're talking about 1995,
95, 96. He was Shakespearean. He was great. You'd love to see him on the street. So when we met in Bergdorf's and he said, help me, advise me to find a president, I was delighted. I was thrilled. I thought, this is hilarious.
I'm wondering, the statement that he said, which he's just made, which is, she's not my type, that was the number one thing.
I love that I'm not his type.
He has said that previously. There was a woman, Jessica Leeds, who came forward, and he said, I think we actually have the tape of what he said, and it echoes similar language. Let's just play what he said about Jessica Leeds in front of a crowd.
When you looked at that horrible woman last night, you said, I don't think so. I don't think so. She would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man. You don't know. That would not be my first choice.
He also called Miss Universe fat. Miss Piggy, I think he called her. Miss Universe, one of the most beautiful women in the solar system, and he called her fat.
The other thing that he said is that you are totally lying. He said, again, in this interview, new interview, he said, totally lying. I don't know anything about her. I know nothing about this woman. I know nothing about her. It's just a terrible thing that people can make statements like that.
He's denied all 15 women who've come forward. He denies, he turns it around, he threatens, and he attacks.
As for Trump, upon learning the news that he would have to sit for a deposition, he released a statement himself saying, quote, I don't know this woman, have no idea who she is, other than it seems she got a picture of me many years ago with her husband shaking my hand on a reception line at a celebrity charity event. She completely made up a story that I met her at the doors of a crowded New York City department store and within minutes swooned her. It is a hoax and a lie, just like all the other hoaxes that have been played on me for the past 7 years. And while I'm not supposed to say it, I will. This woman is not my type. She has no idea what day, what week, what month, what year, or what decade this so-called event supposedly took place. The reason she doesn't know is because it never happened, and she doesn't want to get caught up in the details or facts that can be proven wrong. He goes on to say, quote, our justice system is broken along with everything else in our country. Her lawyer is a political operative and Cuomo crony who goes around telling people that the way to beat Trump is to sue him all over the place. She is suing me on numerous frivolous cases, just like this one, and the court system does nothing to stop it. In the meantime, and for the record, E. Jean Carroll is not telling the truth, as a woman who I had nothing to do with, didn't know, and would have no interest in knowing her even if I had the chance. Now all I have to do is go through years more of legal nonsense in order to clear my name of her and her lawyer's phony attacks on me. This can only happen to Trump. Because, lest you forget, the real victim here, in a case where Donald Trump is accused of raping someone, is Donald Trump. And look, not that any of Trump's rambling, self-serving diatribes should be taken at face value, but the fact that he calls this a hoax, which is the same thing that he's called the Mueller investigation, the 2 impeachment trials, and the DOJ probe into his stolen documents from the White House, is that the thing about these quote-unquote hoaxes is that the Mueller probe resulted in 34 indictments, including 7 guilty pleas. The first impeachment trial is over Trump extorting the Ukrainian president for dirt on then-candidate Joe Biden, which we know he did and which is a corrupt act. The second impeachment trial was for inciting an insurrection on January 6th, which, again, we know he did and was, again, a corrupt act. And the DOJ investigation quite literally turned up over 300 classified documents that he was supposed to give back to the White House and yet made the conscious decision not to. Just because Donald Trump calls them hoaxes doesn't mean they didn't actually happen. And if those verifiable, provable events are hoaxes in Trump's mind, then that actually validates the legitimacy of other events that he calls hoaxes. Think of it this way. I run a red light and get pulled over, and I say that it's all a hoax. The court pulls up the photographic and video evidence of me running that red light, and again, I say that it's a hoax. Then I get arrested for shoplifting, and I tell the same cops that it's a hoax. Let's use some very basic 10-year-old logic here. What do you think the cops are going to think when I say that it's a hoax the second time? What do you think the meaning of hoax coming from my mouth eventually becomes? The fact that Trump keeps getting caught committing crimes and then calling them hoaxes only serves to show that at the end of the day, him calling something a hoax is the clearest sign yet that he's actually done something wrong. In the meantime, it is objectively good news that this case is moving forward, both in terms of getting E. Jean Carroll one step closer to some degree of justice and holding Donald Trump accountable for just one of a long list of crimes. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.